Hi there, my name is Cheryl Crow. I'm so excited to be talking to you today about one of my favorite topics, which is the acceptance paradox. So this is going to be all about how I learned to stop fighting against rheumatoid arthritis and started learning how to thrive with it. So if this isn't intuitive to you, if the word acceptance is a little bit like, what on earth? Why would I want to accept? Don't worry, you're not alone. I guarantee that. And I was right there with you, and it took a lot of therapy and reading and learning for me to understand this. So I'm going to try to break it down and make it as accessible as possible in 20 minutes, and I'm happy to answer questions afterwards. So a quick introduction to me. I am 41 years old at the time of recording. I have had rheumatoid arthritis for 19 years, as well as dysautonomia and anxiety. And I've also been an occupational therapist for 9 years, and I founded Arthritis Life and the Arthritis Life podcast to educate, empower, and inspire people living with primarily inflammatory forms of arthritis like rheumatoid, psoriatic, and spondyloarthritis. And then also I am the creator of the Room to Thrive course and support group program, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later. But first, I want to talk a little bit about my personal journey. So as somebody who felt, at the age of 20, like I was a pretty good problem solver, when I got diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, I was like, okay, this is a problem, but all I need to do is just figure out how to solve it, right? Figure out how to overcome it or fight it or fix it, and then I can get back to normal. And that is a really, really common mindset of people when they're newly diagnosed. And I do want to acknowledge some people do get a fairly linear journey. I would say through all my experience and training, it's not the norm, but it is possible to have a very linear journey in the sense of you get on a medication plan, it works, and you go on your merry way. But the majority of us have experienced a little more like mine, where you try to solve it, and then you get into this valley of disappointment when you realize that I've done everything I'm supposed to do, the things that the textbooks say or the doctors say, and I'm still having some symptoms or some discomfort. And so what helped me at first was learning to separate, what things can I actually control about my condition through lifestyle, medications, all that. Like, what's my toolbox of things I can proactively do to manage my health? But also, what are the things I can't control? What are the things I need to learn how to accept? And that was a huge, positive step. Like, okay, I'm getting somewhere. I feel like I'm more empowered with coping with this. But then inevitably, I enter some valleys of disappointment or frustration with the ups and downs. Maybe the things that you separate into the column of under my control, that worked for the last 4 years, suddenly they feel out of your control, or vice versa. So I have kind of some frustration about number 3. Wait a minute, I'm still trying to separate controllable from uncontrollable, but it's confusing. And so I learned how to give myself self-compassion in those moments and embrace the uncertainties. And then we're going to talk about that word. That's like a quote unquote 4-letter word or swear word for me, because it's such a difficult one for me, is uncertainty, not knowing for sure what's the right thing to do. As like a rule follower or like a type A person, I was like, well, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. But the problem is you're going to reach some level of uncertainty no matter what. So then where I'm at now is kind of accept, okay, I'm going to be going back and forth between figuring out what I can and can't control, accepting what I can't, and then having to redo it when things change, and embracing or maybe I would just say accepting uncertainty, but embracing my life and the possibilities that remain, even with discomfort, even with uncertainty. So I think of my journey as really having 2 sides. I can and it's a balancing act between, again, a fixing mindset, like make the problem go away, put on a hot pack or a cold pack, use a lot of the life hacks we'll be talking about at this event. And then there's a balance of working around it. Let's say this thing isn't going to go away, or I've reached a point where I still have some fatigue. I still have some joint pain. Can I still try to thrive with those things rather than solely focusing on making them go away? Because that might be a losing battle. So the truth will set you free. This is something I had to repeat to myself, and basically my therapist, in not so many words, had to experience this. The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. And I think in my experience, a lot of people don't like to look at this reality, but it's helpful, and for me at least, empowering to stare it in the face, to say, yeah, some problems are solvable, but some problems are persistent or unsolvable in our lifetimes, right? And at first I felt like, well, I'm an optimist. I want to just approach everything like it's solvable. But I've learned that the optimism that's actually even more kind of deeper and more possible and empowering is that I can still live a good life with persistent problems, rather than just saying, I'm just going to solve everything. Because again, that is a losing battle. Some problems are just out of our control and unsolvable. So another inconvenient truth that it seems like hardly anyone wants to acknowledge in the kind of lifestyle medicine world or wellness world is that like some parts of your health are in control and some aren't. Anyone who works in the autoimmune space who tells you otherwise, I would like to know what their secret is, because maybe I'm open to there being a secret in the future to control every single part of my health, because I am a control freak. I would love to hear how many of you are control freaks or identify as one. But it's been much more helpful for me to accept that some things are out of my control. There's an element of randomness. Sometimes you can do everything right and still experience a flare-up, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means that's the nature of life and randomness. So here's the convenient truth. You can learn to distinguish between the two, with the caveat that there will remain this little gray area in the middle. But I find it a very helpful exercise when I'm overwhelmed to make lists of what I can control for sure and what I can't control for sure. And then I will have this little inevitable middle gray zone of like, partly controllable. So for example, I can control whether I pick up my medication, put it in my mouth, or inject it into my body, but I can't necessarily control whether my medication works. We know, right, just from research that you can have 400 patients take the same medicine with the same diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis. Some of them will do great, some of them won't. It's not like the ones who did great tried harder when they took their meds. It's just luck, to some degree. There's a lot that's still unknown about these conditions. So another one that comes up a lot is I can control the words I say to other people about my condition, but I can't necessarily choose whether they believe, or I can't control whether they believe or choose to believe. Okay, well, I can't control whether they choose to believe or doubt my words. That's their choice. So you might think, wait a minute, how do I cope with all the things I can't control? Isn't it kind of depressing to be like, wait, there's all this stuff out of my control? Well, the good news is that the approach, at least in my personal journey, that has helped a lot. And there is a lot of evidence that this helps not only for people with chronic pain, but for anxiety disorders and depression, is an approach called acceptance and commitment therapy, also known as ACT. And the shortening for it is of the process involved in ACT is accept your thoughts and feelings exactly as they are without trying to control them or change them. Again, that's the hard part for me as a control freak. C is the connecting with your values, and T is taking effective action. So it's important to acknowledge that even though the word acceptance is in the title, it's not just about acceptance. It's actually a behavior-based approach as well, where you work on changing your behavior. And so I love Dr. Russ Harris. He wrote the book, The Happiness Trap, which was updated in 2022. And he says, you make room for your feelings, allow them to be exactly as they are. Then you ask, what can I do right now that's meaningful or important? And this is very different from asking, how can I feel better? So I just want to say something I've noticed a lot of people do when they have an autoimmune disease or one of these very gray area conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, is that they become very myopically focused on how can I feel better? I have to feel better. And that's a normal human response to a problem or a threat, right? Pain. But sometimes it's actually more helpful to not say, how can I feel better? You can say, how can I enrich my life with whatever discomfort I'm feeling? So just a few misnomers, or not misnomers, clarifications, myths and facts about what acceptance means in the context of ACT. It means taking what's offered in the present. It does not mean giving up or resigning yourself to an unhappy fate in the future. It just means that this is what's happening in the present and you're willing to take a moment to connect to it. And it also involves expanding to make room for whatever it is you think and feel without resistance. It doesn't mean that you have to feel hopeless again about the future. I feel like I have acceptance of the present moment after working on this a long time, while still having hope for the future. I hope that my disease will always be better controlled in the future, but I have to take a moment to make room for what's possible in the present. And it also doesn't mean neglecting to address the things you can control. It just means taking a moment to connect again to what's happening right now. So a great little analogy for this is using the finger trap toy. So if you think about the stimulus is the things that that are happening in the present moment that you maybe cannot control, things that are, for me, things that I can't control are usually just intrinsically uncomfortable, right? The response is you can either choose to fight that and say, no, I'm resisting it. I don't like it. I want to make it go away. But the more you do that, you get stuck. This is like a really good analogy for people with arthritis because it like literally hurts to use this trap. But I'm going to go back to my screen so you can see my second slide here. And the more we fight against the present moment, the more likely we are to get stuck, particularly when the present moment involves things that we can't control. Of course, if you have something that's uncomfortable, like let's say a little bit of morning stiffness, and you know there's an action you can take, like taking a warm shower that will relieve that feeling, that's a completely, helpful action. But when you learn how to, when it comes to things out of your control, which is a lot of things when it comes to chronic illness, when you learn how to accept, allow, and connect to the present moment, at first, I'm the first one to admit this seemed like, I actually told my therapist, I thought this sounded sadistic at first. Why on earth, if the present moment is painful, either psychologically or physically, why would I want to expand and make room for the present? I get that if you're feeling good and you're like, yeah, I'm going to connect to how great I feel. But the thing is, again, this is unintuitive. That's why it's a paradox. But when you actually take a moment and just say, this is the present moment, my now is not my forever, but I'm going to allow it and connect to whatever I'm feeling, it actually opens you up to what is possible in your life now, not what might happen in the future that might never come. That's why I think, again, a lot of people, they kind of put off the rest of their life when they get diagnosed with an inflammatory arthritis. Oh, I'll just figure this out and then I can live my life. Well, what if you took at least a fraction of that energy that's kind of predicated on a better future and you said, what about now? How can I make my now as enriched and vibrant and beautiful as it can be with my condition, not in this hypothetical better future that may be better, but may never come, right? That's kind of the reality. Some people get remission, some don't. And your doctor could tell you you're 95% likely to get remission, but at a certain point that uncertainty lingers. You don't know whether you're going to be in that 95% or 5%. So we'll get to uncertainty in a few slides, but this is a really, so the finger trap is a classic acceptance and commitment therapy exercise about allowing the present moment. Another one is passengers on the bus. So you imagine you're the driver of the bus and your thoughts and feelings are passengers. Some of them might be uncomfortable thoughts like, what am I going to do? I'm so scared. My life is over. This isn't what I expected from myself. Let's say after your diagnosis, or no one will ever love me now. I'm sad. I should stop. The passengers are kind of yelling at the driver what to do. You need to stop. You need to slow down. You need to take a turn. And then there's also passengers that might feel more comfortable, but may not also be helpful ultimately. Like, oh, just be positive. It's okay. It's okay. Which positive thinking and kind of excessive optimism, in my experience, has been actually for many people a form of denial, because you're denying, you're not willing to look at the actual possibilities of the good and bad of your future. You're just saying, it's going to be better. I know it has to be better. It's going to be better. Okay, I can make it better. And that can only work so long. Again, for if you are one of the lucky people that gets into like really great disease control, then that will have been a helpful strategy for you. But the majority of people are inevitably going to come to some ups and downs, and the positive thinking is not helpful necessarily in the downs, if that's your exclusive coping strategy. So the other thought and passenger on your bus might be, I'm overwhelmed. I have to pull over. I have to take a break. I can't deal with this. So enact on the passengers on the bus exercise, you don't fight your thoughts. You don't fight your passengers. You just allow them and you kind of acknowledge them. You say, oh, hi thoughts. You like to tell me a lot of stories. I see there's stories that I'm a failure, that I can't handle this. And, thank you, brain, for trying to protect me. And this is called being the observing self, the self that's looking at you from a little bit of a remove. And the third step is reminding yourself of your values, where you're going, and what's possible in the now. I think a lot of times people live their life as if and I'll tell you, I guess I'll say, before I kind of learned to act, I would live my life with this idea that I just need to make all the discomfort go away and then I can be happy. So the idea would be like, take all the bad passengers off my bus, take the sad ones, the angry ones, the frustrated ones, the grieving ones, fix them all, like from maybe a traditional cognitive behavior therapy standpoint, like, oh, those are distortions. I'm just going to reframe them so I feel better about them. That strategy did not work for me, and it doesn't work for a lot of people. And what's really cool is that what I've learned is that I don't have to make them go away to have a good life. I think it was like this huge aha moment, because before, again, I thought, well, in order to be happy, you have to take away all the unhappy thoughts. But now I've realized this is why what Dr. Russ Harris calls the happiness trap. The happiness trap is the more we seek exclusive happy thoughts, the more likely we are doomed to fail. But when we accept that life involves a degree of discomfort, life inherently involves suffering. So it's kind of a mindfulness based kind of philosophically more like almost a Buddhist based approach. You say life is suffering. That's the default assumption. And I can still live a good life with inevitable suffering that comes up. So I got excited about this slide. I'm trying to make uncertainty more fun, but it's horrible. So I can say I don't like uncertainty. It bothers me. It makes me uncomfortable. But again, if I'm the driver of the bus, I know that I can try to fix the problem of uncertainty, and I'm going to waste a lot of energy. No matter what I do or say, uncertainty is a fundamental truth of life. And the unknowns, which I put under the uncertainty, how is this disease going to progress? What is my life going to look like in 10 years, 20 years? No one can answer that for me. I could talk to every expert in rheumatology in the rest of the world. No one can predict the future. That's just reality. So when a lot of us think about the future, a lot of us are just asking a very basic question, right? I'm sure all of you've asked this to yourself. Will this get better? Will whatever it is I'm getting better, feeling get better? Will my pain get better? My fatigue, my overall disease activity, my blood work, and there's 3 different approaches. We can have the positive thinking approach, like, yes, it will. I just need to learn everything. Maybe some of you approached this Arthritis Life Hack Extravaganza with that mindset. And others of you might be like more of the skeptics, or certain that it's going to get worse. Nope, it doesn't matter what I do. There's no hope. It's going to get worse. And I will acknowledge that rheumatoid arthritis and these inflammatory types of arthritis are by definition progressive diseases. That said, more people than ever are going into remission through medications primarily, and also lifestyle interventions. But the fact is that accepting uncertainty, that's door number 2, accepting the fact that it might get better, it might get worse, it might get better for 5 years. Like in my case, I went into medicated remission for 5 years, and then it got worse again, and then it got better, and then it got worse, and then it got better, and then it got worse. It's most likely going to be up and down, and I don't know. And I can still have a wonderful, meaningful life with this uncertainty. Because the fact is, the positive vibes only, or the doom and gloom only, those are both forms of certainty. They're just on different poles, whereas the uncertainty is the fundamental truth in the middle. So, this is probably too much for now. Just take a screenshot of it. But, my old pattern was notice that the present moment is uncomfortable, try to fix it or distract myself or avoid it. And as a lot of therapists will tell you, avoidance is not a good long-term strategy for anxiety in particular. And because I've gone through therapy for claustrophobia as well. So the new pattern is actually expanding and allowing for whatever I'm feeling, even if it's uncomfortable, like anxiety or pain, and turning towards what's still possible. So that's really been, like, if I could summarize this in one phrase, it would be thriving despite. Thriving with rheumatoid arthritis, thriving despite the fact that I have rheumatoid arthritis, or uncertainty, or pain, or fatigue, because I'm no longer wasting so much time trying to solve a fundamentally unsolvable problem. So this topic falls under acceptance and commitment therapy, is one of actually the many tools that we talk about in Room to Thrive. And I've developed this Thrive framework to give people the tools to navigate real life with rheumatic disease, all the rheumatic diseases like psoriatic arthritis, rheumatoid, ankylosing spondylitis, and non-radiographic axial spondyloarthropathy. Say that 5 times fast. And so we cover a lot more than this, covering the basic, evidence-based tools for pain and fatigue, habits, as well as relationships and executive functions. And you have an option of a self-paced course or the course plus a 12-week live virtual support group program, which is great. So on the digital goodie bag, which is for anyone who purchased the VIP ticket, which you can still do, you can get 30% off of that in the next group. For the live group starts in March. So thank you so much for all your time. I also have my contact info at myarthritislife.net, and I'm looking forward to the live Q&A.